Welcome to Ancient Mysteries. I'm your host, Ben Carter. And in today's episode, we journey deep into the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where whispers speak of a lost city swallowed by time and jungle. Known only as the City of Z, it has haunted explorers for over a century. Was there once a great civilization hidden in the green vastness? And if so, why did it vanish without a trace? Some believe Z is real, and that its secrets remain buried in the shadows of the forest. The story begins long before modern explorers set their sights on the Amazon. For centuries, indigenous peoples spoke of great settlements hidden in the jungle, cities built of stone and earth, ruled by priest kings and humming with life. Oral traditions described shining roads, massive plazas, and temples that pierced the forest canopy. These were not the imaginings of colonial mythmakers. They were accounts passed down from elders who claimed ancestral ties to something far older than the maps of Europe ever recorded. Archaeologists now acknowledge that the Amazon was never the untouched, pristine wilderness it was once believed to be. Long before European contact, it was home to millions, diverse and complex societies that shaped the land itself. Through slash and char techniques, they enriched the soil, creating what's known as terra preta, literally black earth. This artificially enhanced soil, still fertile centuries later, hints at agricultural sophistication on a massive scale. Satellite imagery and aerial surveys have revealed massive geometric patterns across Brazil, Bolivia, and Peru, circular ditches, raised causeways, and sprawling mounds that suggest advanced city planning. One of the most famous of these early civilizations is the Marahara culture, which flourished on Marajó Island at the mouth of the Amazon River, from roughly 400 to 1400 AD. These people created elaborate pottery, organized settlement grids, and extensive canal systems for irrigation and transport. Their society was stratified and ceremonial, and their population may have numbered in the tens of thousands. Across the region, the evidence grows. Ceremonial plazas, sunken roads, defensive earthworks, and burial mounds all point to the presence of once thriving societies. And yet, for much of the modern era, the prevailing narrative dismissed these stories. The idea of an advanced civilization in the Amazon didn't fit the colonial perspective of a wild, uncivilized land. Early Spanish explorers reported grand cities along the rivers, like Francisco de Orellana in the 1540s, but their accounts were quickly labeled as exaggerations or outright lies. What wasn't immediately visible beneath the thick canopy was assumed not to exist. The forest, with its heat, insects, and endless green, seemed too hostile to support complex life. The notion that it once held cities rivaling those of Mesoamerica or the Andes was rejected by most academics for generations. Yet the jungle is not a barren void. It is a living, breathing organism that reclaims with astonishing speed. Within decades, stone can vanish beneath moss, vines, and trees, entire villages swallowed within a single lifetime. This natural camouflage has always made the search for ancient Amazonian civilizations uniquely difficult. Unlike desert ruins or mountain temples, the jungle leaves no monuments exposed. What remains are whispers, traces in the soil, fragments of pottery, and the stories that continue to live in the people who call the forest home. It's within this contested landscape of myth and memory that the legend of the lost city of Z was born. Not as an isolated fantasy, but as a focal point. An amalgamation of indigenous memory, scattered archaeological finds, and tantalizing descriptions from the earliest European contact. Z wasn't just a place. For many, it symbolized the possibility that everything we thought we knew about the ancient world was incomplete. That somewhere deep within the Amazon's tangled heart, the remnants of a forgotten civilization lay waiting, not lost, but hidden. The man most famously associated with the search for the lost city of Z was British explorer Lieutenant Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett. A seasoned cartographer and adventurer, Fawcett was no stranger to the Amazon. Throughout the early 20th century, he led multiple expeditions into South America, often venturing where few outsiders had ever set foot. A man of discipline, intellect, and an almost mystical belief in the unknown, Fawcett became increasingly convinced that a great city, possibly the remnants of an ancient civilization, existed somewhere within the unexplored interior of Brazil. Fawcett's obsession with Z began to take shape in 1920 after he examined a document held in Rio de Janeiro's National Library. Known as Manuscript 512, this cryptic 18th-century text was penned by a Portuguese bandeirante, an explorer and fortune hunter, who claimed to have discovered the ruins of a vast stone city deep in the Brazilian interior. The manuscript described arches, wide streets, a statue holding a scepter, and a temple adorned with strange symbols. The location was never clearly stated, and efforts to follow the vague clues it provided had all ended in failure. But to Fawcett, it was a sign. A hint that something ancient and significant had once thrived in the very region he was determined to explore. Fawcett theorized that Zed was a lost city of great antiquity, possibly predating European civilization and untouched by the Spanish conquest. He imagined it not merely as a ruin, but as a cradle of wisdom, its people possessing knowledge that could rival even the Greeks or Egyptians. He believed that this civilization had developed in isolation, hidden from the world by the Amazon's natural defenses. His conviction grew stronger with each expedition, fueled by native legends, unexplained ruins, and stories of lost tribes with golden idols and white-skinned ancestors. In 1925, Fawcett embarked on what would become his final journey. He was accompanied by his son Jack and Jack's friend Raleigh Rimmel. Armed with only limited supplies, a few porters and a small team, Fawcett set out into the Mato Grosso region of Brazil. He left instructions that if he didn't return, no rescue attempts should be made, fearing the Amazon's harsh conditions and the potential for violent encounters with local tribes. The group vanished without a trace. For decades, their disappearance became as legendary as the city they were seeking. Rescue missions followed, many ending in failure, some in death. Stories emerged of sightings, of letters written in captivity, and even of Fawcett becoming a tribal chief. None were confirmed. The fate of Fawcett and his companions remains one of exploration's great mysteries. But even in absence, his legacy endured. He had reignited global interest in the Amazon as a place not just of wilderness, but of lost civilizations waiting to be rediscovered. Fawcett's Zay was never officially found. Some scholars dismissed it as fantasy, a colonial dream of golden cities and noble savages. Others saw it as a metaphor, a symbol of mankind's quest for meaning in the face of the unknown. But for many, especially in Brazil, the legend still holds power. Deep in the forest, where satellite signals fail and maps go blank, stories still circulate, of ruins seen from the canopy, of stone roads appearing in the dry season, and of jungle tribes guarding secrets older than history. Whether or not Zed existed as Fawcett imagined, his journey transformed the mystery into a question that refuses to fade. What else lies hidden beneath the green veil of the Amazon? Despite the skepticism that surrounded Fawcett's theories in the years following his disappearance, mounting archaeological evidence has begun to paint a very different picture of the Amazon, one far closer to what he believed. For decades, the prevailing academic view held that the rainforest's poor soil and dense canopy made it unsuitable for large-scale civilization. Any ancient societies in the region were assumed to be small, nomadic, and scattered. But over the last few decades, discoveries have begun to radically challenge this narrative. In the Brazilian state of Acre, deep in the western Amazon, archaeologists uncovered massive geoglyphs carved into the earth, hundreds of geometric shapes, including squares, circles, and octagons, some stretching for hundreds of feet. These formations, dating back at least 2,000 years, were clearly man-made. Aerial photography and satellite imagery revealed patterns invisible from the ground, entire networks of roads, raised fields, canals, and ceremonial spaces. The scale and precision of the layouts suggested centralized planning and a deep understanding of geometry and engineering. Excavations within these geoglyph sites uncovered pottery, tools, and evidence of complex agriculture. But perhaps most significant was the discovery of terra preta, dark, nutrient-rich soil that had been deliberately engineered. By mixing charcoal, bone, plant matter, and human waste into the otherwise infertile Amazonian soil, ancient peoples created a self-sustaining growing medium that remains fertile even today. This discovery revolutionized understanding of Amazonian agriculture and proved that large populations could have been supported through intensive and sustainable farming practices. Further evidence emerged in the Xingu region, where anthropologist Michael Heckenberger and his team, working in collaboration with the Kwikuro people, unearthed the remnants of a sprawling pre-Columbian society. Using ground surveys, GPS mapping, and LiDAR technology, they identified a series of interconnected settlements stretching across miles of forest. These villages were organized in a grid-like pattern, connected by straight roads and enclosed by defensive moats and palisades. At its peak, the region may have housed tens of thousands of people, forming what some have called a garden city civilization. Even more astonishing were discoveries made using LiDAR, light detection and ranging technology, which allows researchers to peer beneath the forest canopy. In 2022, an international team working in the Bolivian Amazon revealed the presence of massive pre-Hispanic settlements hidden beneath the jungle. These sites featured monumental platform mounds, reservoirs, and elevated causeways arranged in highly structured urban layouts. The scale was unexpected, suggesting a level of social complexity that rivaled better-known civilizations of the ancient Americas. These findings do not point to a single city named Z, but rather a network of urbanized societies that once thrived in the rainforest, their remains swallowed by centuries of regrowth. They support the idea that the Amazon was not an untouched wilderness, but a human-shaped landscape, a cultural mosaic of great sophistication and resilience. And while none of these discoveries match Fawcett's romanticized vision of a golden city, they validate the core of his belief that the jungle once teemed with life, knowledge, and architecture, now lost to time. The archaeological record, still fragmentary and incomplete, continues to grow. Pottery shards, buried foundations, and ancient roadways speak of a past more advanced than anyone imagined a century ago. What was once seen as fantasy is becoming history, reconstructed one dig, one scan, and one clue at a time. In this shifting landscape of discovery, the legend of the lost city of Z no longer seems so far-fetched. It seems instead to have been a signpost, pointing not to a myth, but to a forgotten truth just beginning to emerge. Within academic circles, reactions to these discoveries have been cautious, but increasingly open to reinterpretation. For decades, scholars dismissed the notion of advanced pre-Columbian civilizations in the Amazon, citing poor soil conditions, limited architecture, and a lack of monumental ruins as key arguments against large-scale societal development. Yet the growing body of physical evidence has forced many to reconsider these assumptions. While there is still no consensus on the size and complexity of these ancient societies, a significant shift is underway. The binary view of primitive jungle tribes versus urbanized empires is giving way to a more nuanced understanding of the rainforest's ancient inhabitants. Mainstream archaeologists now generally agree that the Amazon supported dense populations long before European contact. The presence of engineered soils, urban planning, and massive geoglyphs indicates the existence of societies capable of sophisticated environmental manipulation. However, many scholars are reluctant to apply the term civilization in the classical sense. Unlike the stone pyramids of the Maya or the monumental temples of Egypt, Amazonian cultures left behind few grand edifices. Their materials, primarily wood, clay, and earth, decayed quickly in the humid environment, erasing much of what was built. The absence of stone doesn't indicate a lack of complexity, but rather a different set of cultural and material priorities. Some anthropologists argue that these societies were decentralized, consisting of loosely connected village clusters rather than centralized city-states. According to this view, the Amazon's ancient people lived in a kind of urban forest, where settlements were interspersed with cultivated land and wild areas, forming a sustainable, resilient network. This idea aligns with recent findings of low-density urbanism, where communities are integrated into the landscape rather than dominating it. It challenges long-held definitions of civilization, which often prioritize hierarchy, monumentality, and written language as benchmarks of advancement. The oral histories of indigenous groups further complicate the picture. Many Amazonian tribes preserve legends of great cities, ancestral migrations, and sacred sites now buried by forest or submerged by rivers. Anthropologists working with native communities have found that these stories, long dismissed as folklore, often correspond with geographical features or archaeological anomalies. For example, elders may describe a mound where spirits dwell, only for archaeologists to later discover a burial site or ancient plaza at that exact location. These correlations suggest that local memory preserves real historical information, passed down through generations in metaphorical or symbolic form. Even as new evidence accumulates, academic caution remains. Some researchers worry about overstating the significance of early finds, fearing a return to the sensationalism that once surrounded Amazon exploration. Others caution that comparisons to cities like Rome or Tenochtitlan are misleading, imposing Western models of urbanization onto cultures that developed in entirely different ecological and spiritual contexts. Still, the prevailing skepticism that greeted Percy Fawcett's theories is no longer dominant. A new generation of researchers is re-examining the forest not as a void, but as a palimpsest, one in which traces of ancient knowledge, engineering and cosmology are slowly being uncovered. As LiDAR continues to reveal hidden structures and fieldwork expands into previously inaccessible regions, the academic paradigm continues to shift. The idea of a lost Amazonian civilization, once relegated to the realm of fantasy, is now firmly within the domain of scientific inquiry. And while Fawcett's City of Z may never be found in the form he imagined, the essence of his quest, the belief that the Amazon holds secrets that defy modern understanding, is being vindicated, one discovery at a time. Despite the growing body of archaeological evidence and changing academic attitudes, the mystery remains far from settled. Significant gaps persist in the data, and many questions remain unanswered. Some discoveries raise more doubts than clarity, with researchers divided over their interpretation. Not all agree on the scale of the settlements or the level of societal complexity involved. Some argue that the geometric earthworks scattered across the Amazon were primarily ceremonial or defensive in nature, rather than signs of true urban centres. Others question whether the elevated causeways and moats discovered through LiDAR represent permanent infrastructure or seasonal features built to adapt to the region's fluctuating floodwaters. There is also ongoing debate over the sudden disappearance of these societies. The causes remain uncertain. Were they wiped out by European diseases that spread faster than colonial armies? Did internal collapse, resource depletion, or warfare among tribes lead to abandonment? Or was it a more gradual process, an intentional retreat, a shift in cultural patterns, a rewilding of once-managed landscapes? The answers are elusive, in part because the jungle itself obscures the evidence. Wood rots, trails vanish, structures collapse under plant growth, and rivers shift course, taking entire settlements with them. Perhaps one of the most perplexing contradictions lies in the disparity between the scale of the sites being discovered and the historical silence that surrounds them. Why did early explorers like Orellana report cities along the Amazon River, only for later expeditions to find nothing? Some theorists suggest that the massive depopulation caused by introduced diseases, smallpox, influenza, measles, decimated entire communities before they could be studied. By the time later explorers arrived, these societies had collapsed or migrated, their infrastructure overtaken by forest. With no written records and a natural environment hostile to preservation, their existence was forgotten outside oral tradition. Conflicting interpretations also emerge around specific finds. The manuscript 512 that inspired Fawcett, for instance, remains a contentious artifact. Some historians believe it was embellished or fabricated by a Portuguese explorer eager to secure funding. Others argue it reflects a genuine, if distorted, encounter with ancient ruins that have yet to be rediscovered. Similarly, the many sightings of stone ruins reported by rubber tappers, missionaries and indigenous guides have often been written off as misidentifications, natural rock formations, termite mounds, or imaginative storytelling, without thorough investigation. There is tension, too, between indigenous knowledge and academic authority. While modern science is only beginning to uncover the true extent of Amazonian history, local communities have long preserved oral traditions describing vast cities, sky beings, and great floods that changed the land forever. Yet these voices have often been marginalized or viewed as symbolic rather than historical. Today, some researchers are beginning to bridge that gap. treating indigenous memory not just as myth, but as data, a different form of record-keeping that complements archaeological evidence. At the heart of the debate lies a broader question. How much of ancient history has been lost simply because we failed to recognize it? For centuries, the dominant historical models favored permanence, monuments in stone, vast empires, written records. But what if other civilizations expressed complexity in forms that don't survive the passage of time so easily? What if the Amazon's greatest societies lived in harmony with their environment to such a degree that their legacy vanished not through destruction, but through absorption back into the forest? These unresolved questions continue to animate both scholarly research and popular fascination. The more we uncover, the more we realize how much remains hidden. And as the search for Z persists, not as a specific city but as a symbol of everything lost to time, the Amazon remains an active mystery. A vast, breathing archive, its pages written in soil, river and canopy, waiting to be read. As the boundaries of conventional interpretation stretch, the realm of speculation grows ever more vibrant. Fringe theorists, alternative historians, and esoteric researchers have long claimed that the Amazon conceals more than just forgotten settlements. It hides the remnants of an ancient advanced civilization, perhaps one that predates all known cultures. Some believe the lost city of Z wasn't merely a jungle metropolis, but the final outpost of a lost world, one destroyed by cataclysm or hidden by design. In these narratives, Z becomes more than a place. It becomes a cipher, a threshold into a forbidden chapter of human history. One of the more provocative ideas links Z to the myth of Atlantis. According to this view, survivors of a global cataclysm, whether natural or engineered, fled their ruined homeland and seeded new civilizations around the world. The dense, inaccessible Amazon became an ideal refuge, its remoteness protecting sacred knowledge and ancient technologies from the chaos unfolding beyond. These theorists suggest that the geometric precision of the Amazonian geoglyphs, the unexplained astronomical alignments, and the advanced agricultural methods point not to a primitive culture, but to a legacy inherited from a much older, possibly pre-Ice Age society. Others propose that the Amazon was once home to a civilization that understood the Earth's natural energy systems in ways we no longer comprehend. Some of the geoglyphs and ceremonial mounds are thought to function as energy conductors, aligned with magnetic fields or ley lines that channel planetary forces. Within this framework, the jungle was not an obstacle, but a conscious element of spiritual and energetic design. Z, then, was not just a city. It was a tuning fork for the earth, a place where stone, soil and sky interacted through ancient science or ritual practice. The more extreme theories push into even stranger territory. Claims of strange lights seen over remote jungle clearings, stories of ancient machines humming beneath the ground, and reports of metallic objects found in inaccessible regions have fueled speculation that the Amazon once harbored alien technology or extraterrestrial visitors. Some fringe researchers suggest that ancient shamans made contact with non-human intelligences, either through altered states of consciousness or literal encounters. In this view, Z becomes a node, a contact point between Earth and the cosmos, guarded by vegetation and time. There are also claims, largely anecdotal and unverified, that secret expeditions funded by governments or private interests have already discovered parts of Z, but have kept the findings hidden. This theory posits that the knowledge buried in the jungle, if fully uncovered, would upend modern historical and religious narratives. Whether rooted in paranoia or distrust of institutional control, these beliefs feed the sense that something important is being withheld, and that the myth of Z is kept alive not just by mystery, but by design. Even among those who reject these fringe positions, the power of the myth endures. Z as a symbol taps into a universal human yearning, to find what has been lost, to reconnect with a forgotten truth, to uncover the secrets buried beneath the surface of the known world. In this way, Z functions like the Holy Grail, El Dorado, or the Fountain of Youth, a destination both literal and metaphorical, representing not only a place in the jungle, but a hidden layer of reality itself. The persistence of these speculative ideas, despite a lack of definitive proof, speaks to their emotional and psychological weight. They fill the spaces that science hasn't yet reached, or perhaps isn't ready to. Whether as metaphor, memory, or something more, the legend of Z continues to inspire those who believe that the greatest mysteries are not only unsolved, but deliberately forgotten. The symbolic weight of the lost city of Z extends far beyond its physical or historical possibility. In many ways, Z represents a mirror held up to civilization itself, an idea that forces us to question what we mean by progress, what we choose to remember, and what we allow to be forgotten. In the Western imagination, the jungle has long been cast as a place of chaos, danger, and mystery. But if Z existed, then the forest also served as a cradle of wisdom, a protected archive of human potential, and perhaps even a model for balance between society and nature that modern systems have yet to achieve. The mythology around Z reflects a deeper cultural longing, an ache for origin stories that go beyond the familiar. For centuries, dominant historical narratives have positioned civilization as the product of temperate climates, river valleys, and centralized power. Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, the Indus, all are praised as the cradles of civilization. But if the Amazon once supported urban complexity, astronomical knowledge, and sustainable ecological design, then the foundations of human achievement are far broader and far older than textbooks have suggested. In this sense, Z becomes a symbol of erased memory, not simply forgotten but actively obscured by jungle overgrowth, by colonial ideology, by the selective preservation of certain histories over others. The forest becomes an archive written in a language few know how to read. In contrast to the linear, monumental legacy of empires, the Amazon offers a different model, cyclical, symbiotic, organic. A civilization that thrived not by conquering nature, but by blending with it, managing its cycles and adapting to its rhythms. The power of Z also lies in its challenge to contemporary notions of knowledge. For centuries, modernity has defined truth through documentation, measurement, and institutional validation. Oral traditions, experiential knowledge, and sacred cosmologies were relegated to the margins, labelled superstition or myth. But the resurgence of interest in indigenous ways of knowing, combined with cutting-edge technologies like LiDAR, has begun to rewrite that equation. The stories told by Amazonian elders once ignored now align with physical evidence. The line between myth and memory begins to blur, revealing how cultural knowledge can survive where paper and stone do not. Z is also a story of humility. It reminds us that vast portions of human history remain undocumented, and that some of the most advanced systems ever devised may have left almost no trace. The civilization behind Z may have had no need for monuments, no desire for conquest, and no written archives in the traditional sense. Their mastery may have been ecological rather than imperial, encoded in landscapes rather than scripts. In this view, Z challenges the entire hierarchy of how we define sophistication. It suggests that intelligence and advancement don't always announce themselves in stone columns or imperial records. Sometimes they hide in forest patterns, soil chemistry, and the stories whispered from one generation to the next. Perhaps most significantly, Z reflects a confrontation with the limits of modern exploration. In an age where satellites map every corner of the globe and data defines reality, Z endures as a mystery that resists capture. It stands for the idea that the world is still bigger than we know, and that beneath the surface, both literal and metaphorical, vast domains of knowledge remain. Domains that cannot be scanned, catalogued, or neatly filed away. Domains that demand not only discovery, but respect. In this way, Z becomes more than a lost city. It becomes a symbol of what we still have to learn. Across the span of research, oral tradition, physical discovery, and speculative interpretation, several key threads emerge, each one contributing to the enduring allure of the lost city of Z. At the core lies the Amazon itself, a region once dismissed as inhospitable to civilization, now increasingly recognized as a landscape shaped by generations of human ingenuity. The terra preta soils, geoglyphs, causeways, and settlement grids reveal a picture of complex and adaptive societies capable of engineering their environment with precision and care. These discoveries overturn the long-standing assumption that the rainforest was a barrier to advancement. Instead, it becomes a testament to the ingenuity of those who once called it home. Equally central is the enigma of Percy Fawcett, whose disappearance remains one of the most enduring exploration mysteries of the 20th century. His unwavering belief in a lost city hidden within the jungle drove him into the unknown, and eventually into legend. While critics dismissed his vision as delusional, the broad strokes of his theory have found unexpected echoes in the archaeological record. Though no golden city has been uncovered, the evidence of large, organized settlements across the basin supports the idea that the Amazon's past is richer and more complex than previously believed. Fawcett may have erred in the details, but his instinct that something had been missed was not unfounded. There are also the indigenous narratives, long neglected, now viewed in a new light. Tribes across the Amazon maintain stories of ancestors who lived in cities of stone and light, of temples that hummed with power, of gods who departed into the forest or the sky. These accounts, once labelled myth, increasingly appear as repositories of encoded history, preserved in symbolic form, passed down through ritual and oral memory. In them we find hints not only of physical places, but of ways of life radically different from those imposed by colonization. Their consistency across vast distances and cultures suggests a shared heritage that predated European contact and was disrupted, though not entirely erased, by its arrival. The contradictions among academic interpretations, the gaps in the archaeological record, and the wildly divergent fringe theories all speak to the same underlying truth. We are still in the early stages of understanding what the Amazon once was. The tools now at our disposal, satellite imaging, LiDAR, soil chemistry, ethnography, are beginning to fill in the map. But the forest continues to guard its secrets. For every ruin exposed, a dozen more lie hidden. For every theory proposed, 100 questions follow. The jungle has not given up its full story. And then there is Z itself, not just as a city, but as an idea. It represents the possibility that history is incomplete, that human achievement is broader and deeper than the surviving records suggest. It invites us to rethink the metrics of greatness, to consider that civilizations may have risen and fallen in forms unfamiliar to modern eyes, neither lesser nor primitive, but simply different. Z may never be found on a map, but its presence is felt in every discovery that forces us to rewrite what we thought we knew. In this layered, evolving narrative, Z becomes a focal point for inquiry, wonder, and humility. Whether it existed exactly as Fawcett imagined is no longer the most pressing question. What matters is what the search for Z continues to uncover, not only in the soil of the Amazon, but in the structures of our knowledge. It reminds us that exploration is never just about terrain. It is about confronting the boundaries of belief and accepting that those boundaries may be far more fragile than we think. In the dense shadows of the Amazon, the myth of the lost city of Ze continues to echo, not as a fading tale of colonial fantasy, but as a living riddle carved into the heart of one of the world's last great wildernesses. The jungle, vast and layered with centuries of growth, has swallowed empires and preserved them in silence. Every expedition, every satellite scan, and every oral account passed from elder to child becomes a thread in the intricate tapestry of a forgotten past that refuses to be dismissed. Z may or may not be a single city, but its story has outgrown the confines of maps and markers. It has become a symbol of something deeper, a vast and still unfolding history hidden beneath vines and time. What Z represents may be more important than what it was. In an era where knowledge is digitized, compartmentalized, and often commercialized, Z reminds us that some truths resist being pinned down. The mystery is not a flaw in the story, it is the story. The belief that there are still places on this earth not fully understood, still histories untold, is itself a form of hope. It suggests that human civilization is not a completed arc, but a sprawling network of forgotten branches, some of which have yet to be uncovered. The evidence now points to a powerful re-evaluation of the Amazon. Far from an empty wilderness, it was home to people who mastered its complexities, who lived in balance with the cycles of nature, and who created urban landscapes that defy our old paradigms. These societies left behind no empires of conquest, no libraries of parchment, but they left patterns in the soil, geometry in the ground, and stories etched into memory. Perhaps their greatest legacy was not in what they built, but in how they lived. embedded in the land, their knowledge symbiotic with the rhythms of rivers, stars, and rain. For all the science, maps, and models we possess today, there remains something deeply human in the longing for a hidden city. The hope that just beyond the reach of our instruments, something wondrous still lies undiscovered. That somewhere in the tangle of trees and silence, a doorway to the past stands waiting, not to glorify ancient conquest, but to teach us how much we've lost by forgetting. In searching for Z, we search not only for ruins, but for a different kind of wisdom, one that modernity may need more than ever. Z is not a destination, it is a direction, a call to reimagine what we think we know about the ancient world and what we are willing to believe about ourselves. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Ancient Mysteries. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to Ancient Mysteries on Spotify. Subscribe now.